Yeah, hi, my name's Ilana Cowland. I am pre-coffee, so you must forgive me, but here it is. They're all good. I live in Jerusalem. I'm from England originally, as you can hear from my accent. If you get bored, just let me know. I'll start singing Mary Poppins songs. So I work in Jewish education with women and have done for many, many years, involved in anything to do with women's issues in Judaism and relationships. And Zehava and I met, where did we meet Zehava? Was it this year we met for the first time? Yeah. No.
We've met before. Thank you so much for remembering. I feel very
I feel
special.
like
But this
I feel
year
like
we
I know you.
took this year we took a group of women on an Israel trip, H Destiny,
Yeah.
which hopefully we'll be doing again because it was so amazing. And
Yeah.
Ilana was our fearless leader, and we loved her so much. So we took the opportunity to bring her back here.
That's right. That's right. That's what I was going to say. We have met before, but this is the first year that we actually had some fun. So that's a whole new level of relationship. So yeah, so I don't know where this conversation is going to go. I think we're gonna springboard off some questions that came up. Obviously based on this extremely conversation starting show that was on Netflix recently, and I think we should just let it go wherever it takes us. If you like my style, you can find my husband and I giving marriage videos, relationships advice on Instagram, Ilana and Jamie. If you've got any personal questions, please feel free to let me know, either here or Zehava will give you my other information. And I must say that this whole experience tonight has been sponsored by an organization called Mikveh USA. They have a lovely website. Am I supposed to be recording? Am I recording? Or Zehava, you are?
I'm recording on my end, but
Okay,
you're
fine. Okay, no, that's fine. They have a lovely website called My Gift of Mikveh. If anybody's dabbling with Mikveh, then I think you've heard them before. I think you've had speakers from them before. And they send people out all over the country talking about marriage. So what a fun thing for me. I'm like, I love this organization. This is my favorite thing to do, is talk about marriage. So yeah, let's begin. What time do we want to finish? We want to finish at not 5, in an hour.
Let's go for that if that works. If there's more questions afterwards, if you're up for it, whoever wants to stay on can stay on. Let's do that.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, great. Lovely. So Zehava, shoot, let's go.
Okay, so let's start with some questions. We'll see how many we get through. So I'm going to start with the first question I got. On Shabbos, we welcome the Shabbos bride, and the woman is the queen. If the woman is to be queen in the bedroom that night, are the young men instructed on how to make the woman feel like a queen? In reality, is there any meaningful sex education instructions given to newlyweds as part of their preparation? If not, why not? And more importantly, how could that be easily accomplished?
Okay. Okay, I didn't understand the beginning of the question. I don't know what it has to do with Shabbat. I think the woman is the queen of the bedroom every night. It was that just I think that was just a nice reference point. Yeah.
Sounds good. Go for
yeah,
it.
Okay. It's a nice reference point. The woman is the queen of the bedroom every night. Maimonides talks about this idea that for a marriage to succeed. Now you have to bear with me because the language it sounds very, very old-fashioned until we go deeper into it. So I'm going to say something that sounds terrible, but bear with me for 2 seconds, okay? He says, for marriage to succeed, the woman has to be the queen and the man has to be the Lord and Master. And I always wonder, if she's the queen and he's the Lord and Master, then who does the washing up, But what that means is, it doesn't say queen and it doesn't say king on purpose. It gives 2 reference points that make each person feel good. Every woman wants to be a queen and every man wants to be in charge, right? Typically speaking. The wisdom over here is that in order for a woman to be a queen, she needs to be treated like a queen. She needs to be treated like a queen. And we're going to go into your question and see how that works in Jewish law, in the bedroom, in the preparation for the bride and groom. However, in order for the man to feel like he's running his home well, he can only succeed if he knows how to treat his woman like a queen. meaning it doesn't take much for a woman to make a man feel, on top of the world. He's very receptive to that. But for a man to really feel like he's succeeding in life, that his house is running well, that he is honor worthy, he's got to do a much harder job, and that is to allow his wife to feel like a queen, because women can really, really be very reluctant to be treated well. Okay, what does that mean? Every woman wants to be treated well. However, in order for her to be really, really treated well, to really have her needs met, she's got to be willing to be vulnerable to the idea that this is the man who can take care of her needs. And women have very high expectations when it comes to having their needs met. So if a woman's needs are not met, she's going to very quickly say, okay, buddy, you're just another one of my kids. I'll take care of you. I'll make you feel good, whatever, jerk, like I'm gonna take care of you because I know how to do that. You failed, so now you go on my list of responsibilities. For a woman to really feel taken care of, she has to feel that this guy knows how to do that. She has to be willing to be vulnerable enough to let him succeed, making her a queen. So this is true not only in emotional relationships, but this is true, very much in the bedroom. Like, to me, the bedroom is really a reflection of what's going on in the relationship, but it's also a ground to model, what's going on in the bedroom. Meaning, I hear women say the whole time, there's no intimacy in my life until we got our emotions sorted. There's no intimacy in my life. And I often feel, yeah, but it's going to take you forever to get your emotions sorted. So why don't we start by making the bedroom, which is like the physical expression of the emotional relationship, why don't we get that right? And when in that space you feel like you are being looked after and vulnerability is a good idea, and the man knows how to take care of you, so then that can then sort of feed into the rest of the relationship. Physical needs are a huge part of our marriages. And if a man doesn't know how to make his wife feel like a queen, then she won't let him try. And at that point, the relationship starts to really suffer. So you have to ask yourself the question, how on earth is a man, especially, by the way, when Judaism, has always advocated, against premarital sex in religious circumstances, in communities, meaning maybe nowadays we're more modern, so that doesn't happen as much. But throughout the ages, you've got this guy who's completely clueless, who hasn't touched a girl, who's walking into a situation where, has to treat her like a queen. Like, what does that even mean? So of course he's not supposed to know how to do that unless he's given instruction. And therefore, in Judaism, there is a very long line of traditions of the girl having classes before she gets married and the boy having classes before he gets married. And in those classes, they not only learn about all the Jewish rules about, everything pertaining to the halachot of anything intimate or marital, because until, it's not done in the classroom, really, it's done really one-on-one when the couple is about to get married. But at the same time, they also have instruction with regards intimacy, and the instruction with regards intimacy is based on the laws. So what for a man is the underlining, sort of foundation stone of the rules of marriage? There's really one particular mitzvah. Okay, there's lots of little laws for how you keep it. There's lots of guidelines of how you keep it, but there's only one mitzvah, and the mitzvah is called Ona. And that means he, it doesn't sound very romantic actually, but it kind of ends up being quite romantic. He, under Torah law, is obligated to be completely responsible for his wife's sexual pleasure. In fact, the reason I think that they say the kasubah under the chuppah in Aramaic is that we don't have to hear all the details, but he completely obligates himself to her. You have to remember it's the man's obligation to get married. So he's responsible now for the marriage working out. It's so funny because we put so much pressure on the woman making her marriage work. But in halacha, it's the man who's responsible. He's got three main responsibilities. He's got to take care of her physically, meaning meet her material needs. He's got to take care of her emotionally, and he's got to take care of her sexually. So he won't be able to fulfill his obligation towards her unless he has learned how to do that. And in the man's training, not only he doesn't really have to worry that much about the laws, because really the laws really falls into the woman's domain. It's a really strong area where the women are completely trusted to keep their home, like, kosher. And I don't mean kitchen kosher, I mean, bedroom kosher, know what the rules are, know when they're allowed to have sex, know how to make sure her body's, prepared for that. All that kind of stuff really falls to her. But his main obligation is to make sure that she feels sexually fulfilled. And he's got to have lessons in order how to do that. How's he supposed to know? So that's been the tradition for all these years, is a man sits, I guess in the old days it was with his father. Right? Nowadays, that's not so comfortable. Nowadays, people sit with a rabbi or a mentor or whatever, and their job is to really instruct them and give them the confidence to be able to walk into this room and to know that, the pleasuring of his wife is what's going to allow the success of the marriage. When she looks to him and says, you are capable of fulfilling my needs, when she feels that from him, it's going to be much easier for them to fulfill the code of the Rambam. Because if you look carefully what it means to be a queen, it's code for to feel loved and worshipped and to feel, taken care of. And if you look carefully at the code for being, a Lord and Master, what that really means, able to look at you as a success. I'm able to naturally feed you the respect that you're going to thrive on. I can respect you because you can look after me. And because you look after me, I feel more respect towards you. And the more respect towards you, the more love you feel towards me. The spiral relationship between a husband and wife, whilst everybody needs both, there is a underlying understanding that a woman does not just want respect in a marriage. She wants to feel cherished and loved. And a man doesn't just want love in a marriage. He needs to feel that his wife looks to him like a success. And if he is not well primed in the bedroom to take care of her, then she's going to just turn into somebody who looks at him as someone whose needs she has to fulfill. And that flips the dynamic of the relationship and takes away their closeness. A question flipped up as we were talking. Did it come on screen for everybody? Was it just for me? Should I just have a quick look? No, 1 second.
If anyone has questions still you can text me and I'll try to forward them if we have time. But we still. Oh,
looked like it was just a recipe. No, it's all good. Okay. I'm like, whipped cream. Wow, we haven't even got to meet each other. Okay, yeah. Zehava, what's the next question? And does that answer the question?
I think you explained that pretty well. Yeah, sounds good.
Okay.
Yeah.
If anybody wants to unmute themselves and do a part 2 on that question, feel free.
Should I unmute everyone, or I'm just scared that there becomes a lot of background noise? So if you wanna.
No, let people chat in their questions to you, and you can add them. Yeah, you do. Let's do it that way. Okay.
Maybe at the end we could unmute it. Okay. So the next question is more directed at the movie that we are talking about, series Unorthodox. The question is, how accurate is Unorthodox? Is that all Orthodox or just the Satmar? She went on for a while. So basically the question was, is the movie realistic of, well, it's pretty obvious. So why don't you answer that?
Yeah. Okay. So you have to, it's, I have to say I got very curious as well, because I don't really know much about being a Hasidic Jewish woman, because I'm an Orthodox Jewish woman, but I'm not Hasidic at all. So I got curious myself, because, I watched that scene so that I'd be well prepared for this evening. And I was really shocked at how many things were really in conflict with Jewish law. And then I had the kind of like interesting task of having to find a Hasidic woman, and I'm comfortable enough to ask her bedroom questions. But I did find one. I have an old friend, and she's pretty open. So I was texting with her. So again, I have to say, I don't really want to talk too much about the customs of different sects, right? I have to be careful which word we're using, because different people do different things. In the same way that I kind of feel like unorthodox in general. If you've got a story to tell, you've got a story to tell. Like, what difference where you come from, you know? But because there's been so much confusion in the world as to whether this is representative. What? Hello? As to whether this is represent.
Hold on, Ilana, sorry. I'm sorry, 1 second. Give me a second here. Sorry. I had to mute everyone again because the new people coming on were unmuted. So I need to unmute you. I thought it was a little better technology. Ilana, there you go. Sorry. Unmute. Okay. Yep.
Okay, got it. Can I carry on, Zehava? Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I'm assuming so. Yeah, I guess you're on mute. Okay, fine. Okay, so my friends who's from a Hasidism called Bobov, I asked her the questions that came up from Unorthodox, and she said that in Hasidism and in regular Jewish law, regular Torah observant communities, the rules, when I say rules, I mean guidelines, are really all the same, except for one possible exception that I'll talk about. So here's what's wrong with what you see in the movie. And the worst part of it, actually, it's a series, right? The worst part of it actually is that, you know, there's 2 sex scenes, right? There's the married couple, and then there's the guy she meets at the club, yeah. And I completely ironically, you know, the scene with the guy in the club actually looks much more like a Jewish sex scene than the first one does. So let's go through what was wrong with that, okay? And what we're going to do is, I don't know how many people have learned about the guidelines of intimacy. We're going to look at it, and then we're going to take a bigger look. We're going to take a bigger look at why there are even guidelines in intimacy, and what we are trying to accomplish in the bedroom in general, on a physical, spiritual level. Okay, so let's take a look technically. First of all, they were in the middle of a fight. Okay, so what's the Jewish guidelines on make-up sex? Make-up sex, which this wasn't even make-up sex. This is just like this is just angry frustration, right? The rules of being in a fight, being angry at all, are you're not supposed to be intimate when you're angry with each other. Okay, why is that? Because intimacy is a time of closeness, and anger is really a contradiction to closeness. The best that can happen is that you have a session where what you're doing is you're letting out your aggression, you know, through you're sort of, you know, it's like a therapeutic session where you're letting out your aggression, which is the last type of mindset for a couple that are supposed to be there, you know, giving love and pleasure to each other and accepting and receiving love and pleasure from each other. It's very hard to please a woman when you're aggressive towards her, angry towards her, and it's very hard to feel vulnerable towards the pleasure if you're in a bad state. So that's number one. If they were angry and upset in an argument, then they needed to resolve the argument before they got, you know, into the bed. They are that. Check, wrong. Okay. Number two, you know, they have all their clothes on. Like, now, I guess, you know, it was within the flavor of the filming, you know, to not make this, you know, a naked bedroom scene, because they're supposed to be, I don't know, coming across as very modest, or the rest of it. But the Jewish guidelines, and when I say guidelines, I want to explain what I mean. You know, there's a whole bunch of guidelines about intimacy, and they're there to accomplish something. If that guideline doesn't work for you, then as long as there's mutuality, there's a lot of room for the guidelines to be shifted. But we're gonna stick with the Jewish guidelines first of all. This is sort of like how Judaism recommends that a husband and wife intimate with each other. What's the problem with wearing clothing during intimacy? Okay. So this is what happens. What clothing does is it creates a form of identity for me. Okay. So obviously, in order to have intimacy with someone, you can't have, you know, you can't be completely dressed. There are parts of you that have to be uncovered. So when you are sort of, you know, in the sexual act, but with clothes on, what you're saying is, here's my identity and here's your identity. Oh, and from the waist down, you know, let's have a conversation. Okay, I hope that's not too graphic, but it's an open, safe space over here. So I'm going to be as open as I need to be, you know, from the waist down, let's have a conversation. That is not Jewish intimacy. In fact, in Jewish speak, that's called Roman intimacy, okay? Which means it comes from a mindset where the whole sexuality was totally hedonistic, based on the body, very much devoid of the intimate relationship. What happens when you remove all your clothing is that you are creating an opportunity for these two bodies to weld into each other, because what you're trying to accomplish, and we are trying to accomplish this throughout our marriages, it's what all our videos are about. If you look at the underlying subscript, is a sense of unity, is a sense of, in this act, I am completely at peace and at oneness with the person, you know, with whom I'm intimate, i.e. my spouse. Anything that gets between us physically, to some degree, there is a subconscious message of this is getting between us. So the fact that they were in this intimate act, but they were completely dressed, did nothing other than create a separation between the two of them. Intimacy is an emotional experience as well as a physical experience. And that sense of these two bodies really becoming one needs to happen without any kind of anything in between. And it's so funny, because the one myth that Jews who know nothing about Judaism still know is the one about the sheet, right? It's such an old, I have to tell you, the sheet is so prevalent that as a kid, before I was taught anything from a substantial source, you know, I thought the sheet thing was true. I remember, you know, the first time somebody broke it to me that the sheet thing wasn't true, and being like, oh, it's like, you know, there's no tooth fairy. Like, this is what we grew up on. You know, this was a worldwide myth. And it's funny, because usually myths are based in a little bit of truth. And this is one of those Jewish myths that not only is it not based on truth, but once you look in the guidelines for how to have intimacy the Jewish way, it's actually completely counter to what the laws say. The laws say, do not create any separation. Do not, like, this is a time where we are becoming one. Anything between the two of you feels like a separation is going to be counterproductive to that experience. Okay. What else was wrong with that? Okay, first of all, you know, I don't know if you noticed, but like, apart from the argument, there was no sense of foreplay, right? They went straight into something without any sense of warming up. And if you notice, the character, you know, suffers from an anxiety connected condition where she needs more than anybody else to feel comfortable and to feel loved and to feel caressed and to feel spoken to and to sort of be put in the mood. There was no mood. It was just a, you know, there's a activity done, let's get out of the way. That's not Jewish law. Jewish law talks about how, again, it is specifically a husband's obligation, but obviously in reality, it's a mutual thing, you know, to move out of whatever mode you were in, you know, before you find yourself in the sexual act, to warm up towards that, to feel love towards that, to feel turned on, to feel, you know, sort of in the zone. And that's a process that takes time. None of that was in the movie. And most of all, primarily, you know, while she is suffering, you know, and again, I don't think if anybody thinks that he raped her, it doesn't look like that to me. It looks like she was hurting physically, but she was, you know, she really recognized that the only way to get through this was to push through her pain, and that was the decision that she made. I think it was a little bit unfair to call it a rape scene for those who did, but you know, she is holding back from her experience, and you know, and he is completely focused on his sexual pleasure. Again, that's not really how it goes in Jewish law. His obligation is towards her sexual pleasure. So if she's not experiencing sexual pleasure, then his obligation come very much second to that. You know, also in Jewish law, there's an idea that when the couple are coming together at the climax of the intimacy, this, you know, to be even more united, you know, they kiss, right? Like, every part of them that can be connected should be connected. You have none of that. You have a man having a completely separated experience, you know, oblivious to what's going on by her, enjoying himself at her expense. The whole thing was so distasteful when it comes you know, to the Jewish you know, sort of description of the unity. In fact, the irony is that there is one other sort of sex scene which you don't see anywhere near as, I mean, not graphically because it was all covered up, but like, any, you know, it's all very alluded to, and that is, you know, the scene when she throws out her Judaism and she goes off to a club and she picks up a stranger and, you know, whatever it is. And in that scene, it's much more accurate, funnily enough. Meaning what? meaning, they're enjoying each other's company, they're enjoying each other's bodies, they're not wearing clothing, there is a sense of love and connection. All that stuff should have been in the first scene. And whilst you don't see this in the movie, and I don't know what the actual woman's story was, suddenly, surprise, surprise, she's not really suffering from her sexual condition. Of course she's not. She's relaxed and happy. So that could have been achieved and should have been achieved, and it wasn't. And that, that sort of, it was so incongruous with, with the Jewish experience of unity and closeness and love and romance and, preparation for this moment of closeness and sexual preparation as well as emotional preparation. It was just nothing. Yes, there was a mezuzah in the room, but that's about it. Now, I said there was one aspect of Hasidic intimacy, which I don't know much about, but I asked my friends, and sometimes I think when I don't know if this lasts deep into the marriage, but in certain sects, the men will still wear their tzitzit when they go into the bedroom, but they'll sort of wear it, I think, to sort of, bring in their consciousness to make sure that this remains a Jewish holy act, and this is symbolic to them. But even the tzitzit, don't ask me how exactly, but they're not supposed to get between the bodies of the husband and the wife. I guess they're just sort of like worn almost like a reminder, but it doesn't interfere in the unity between the husband and wife, from what I understand. I've never been a young Jewish male chassid, so I can't tell you for sure, but that's how it was described to me. Okay, another question came up. I saw 0 to 60. What was that, Zehava? Okay. And does anybody have any questions on what I just said? Is that fair and clear? Oh, I do want to add one piece, actually. Hold on. Can I say one other thing? Am I talking too long? I guess.
No.
Okay.
That's what I paid big bucks for.
Okay. Okay. So I want to put in something that I think is really, really crucial to understanding, sexuality in general, but I think Judaism, actually, if I may. So I heard a story once of a guy who, of course, at the end of every good story, the guy they either get married or he becomes a rabbi, right? So in this one, he becomes a rabbi, right? All the Jewish stories that you hear. I heard this from him. So he was telling me the story of when he was in his pre-Judaism stage, and he came from Australia and had nothing to do with this Judaism, nothing. But he, in his 20s, he discovered his own spirituality, and he went to an ashram, I think in India. I think it was an ashram in India, and he experienced like months of silent meditation retreats. And he's describing how incredibly deep this work is, and how difficult it is, and how painful it is, and how much revelation he has, all the stuff you expect to hear from an ashram story. And then he said that once a week or something, you're allowed to break your silence if you've got a question for the Rebbe, right, the monk, if you have a particular question. So it's 2 minutes for speaking for the whole week, okay? And the question he brought to the rabbi, and the question was like, I don't really understand this whole idea of having to be completely separate from your body in order to be engaged spiritually. Why can't we have both? Why do we have to really engage in abstinence totally in order to have a spirituality? Why can't we have both? And what did the monk say to him? You know what the monk said to him. The monk said to him, "Are you Jewish?" Okay. And the guy was really insulted, actually taken aback. And the only reason that I'm not saying his name, even though he tells his story publicly, is because he lies at this point. He's allowed to tell that if he wants to, but I don't want to speak badly about him. He goes, no, and whatever. The monk goes like, okay. And then about 2 weeks later, they have another conversation. This question comes up, or I think it's at the end when they're allowed to talk again and they're having real conversations. And he brings this question back up again, and the monk's like, "You're rubbish. You are Jewish, aren't you?" And he's like, "Oh, how'd you know?" It's so irritating. Judaism means nothing to me. Here I am trying to engage in Buddhist spirituality. Why is the monk calling me out on my Judaism that I know nothing about? And the monk said, because I've been doing this work for 27 years or whatever the number was. And we work very hard on recognizing that if you want to engage entirely in spirituality, you need to leave your relationship with your body behind so you can be totally present in the realm of spirituality. And it's always the Jews who want to have both. Okay, that's what he said to him, right? So it's always the Jews that want to have both. And there's really a reason for this. And by the way, if you look at any of our commandments, it's very weird how physical they are. Like, why is it that you celebrate your freedom by chewing matzah? Like, you know, why is it that you celebrate your relationship with joy by shaking, you know, we know the lulav and the etzfer, like that. We are so involved in physical things. And the reality is that Jews do not believe in abstinence. It is not a high level for a rabbi to not engage, you know, in a relationship. In fact, there was a rabbi who didn't want to in the Gemara because he wanted to be completely focused on his Torah, and he's not spoken about in any. That's not considered a praise. That's like that's something off with him. You know, the Nazarite that pulls himself back from engaging in his physical beauty, in his physical, you know, appearances by never cutting his hair and never wants to get drunk. When he's finished his term of abstinence, he has to bring a sacrifice of an apology in the temple times. Yeah, we are very anti-abstinence because we don't see the physical world as something that you have to escape in order to engage in spirituality. We see the physical world as something that you have to uplift in order to experience any deep spirituality. So what isn't true, and this is what was so upsetting about the series, because it's a deep misrepresentation over and above all the details I mentioned before. What isn't true is, like, I don't know, like, there's this really weird thing that to have children, which I guess is a mitzvah, you have to do this like really weird thing that, like, I don't know what God was thinking, like, at the time. I don't know, maybe it was a trick. I guess we got to get over and done with, like, so that we can have kids. But, like, you know, who does that, right? That's not Jewish. Okay, that sounds like a 7-year-old little boy, you know, like, ew, that's gross, right? What is Jewish is a different story. So let me talk to you about sex through the mind of the spiritual, and then let's bring the physical into it, and let's see if we can really conjure up a pretty picture. You know, you have to understand what it says in Genesis, that there was this soul that was like torn apart. You know, Adam and Eve was a male female thing, and it got torn apart, and then it has to reunite. So that's a lesson for humanity. Humanity needs to know that, you know, the person that you marry, the husband that you have, and it can be true of multiple relationships, right? We know that you can have more than one soul mate, but that soulmate is intrinsically connected. These souls are intrinsically connected, and what happens is they get kind of like ripped apart. Imagine some painful severance between this poor male side of the soul and this poor female side of the soul, and he gets put into one body and she gets put into another. Or maybe he's born after she is, or she's born after he is, or he's born in Paris and she's born in New Zealand, I don't know. And they go on their journey, and a big part of their life story is going to somehow find them back together again at some point. Okay, they're going to have this moment of insight that is now confused with the idea of falling in love, but at its purest point, that's almost like God's way of letting you know that, like, something magical is happening over here. And these poor souls are like finally reunited. And we don't feel our souls at all. If we felt our souls, then technically speaking, every time we did something wrong, we would get a soul ache. We don't feel our souls, but we know of the experience of our souls. And in my body, I house half a soul, as it were, right? It's a whole soul, but it's like one piece of a bigger story. And, you know, and in a husband's body, in a spouse's body, there's the other part. And finally, there's this incredible opportunity for these two souls to reunite. And where does that happen? What is this moment? This moment is when this body that has the capacity to be separate, but also has the capacity, really like a jigsaw piece, to reunite in such an intimate way. It's like a circuit is created. Okay, so in this moment of spiritual connection, you have it completely backed up with the most powerful, overwhelming sense of physical connection. It's powerful because of the sexual feelings that we have. It's powerful because of the sense of unity. It's powerful because of the sense of intimacy. All the Jewish, like I said, laws that are not really so much laws as they are guidelines, as long as they're helping the couple achieve this end, they're there to be able to create a total sense of connection between these two people on a spiritual level, which we don't really access, so we're not conscious of that's happening also. And that's completely replicated, entirely replicated by the physicality. In fact, in Jewish law, it talks about all the things that you could be thinking of. What is the ideal thing to be thinking of at the time of intimacy? And I read the rabbi saying, you could think about like spirituality, you could think about God, you could think about having holy children, but there's nothing as holy, okay, there's nothing as spot on in terms of what you're trying to achieve than the focus on the oneness, the I've lost which bit is you and which bit is me, because there is this peaceful, completely harmonious reconnection that's happening over here. So all the rules that you might hear of, why is it advised that the lights are down when a Jewish couple are together? Because when the lights are on, I don't mean during foreplay, I mean sort of during the intimacy, like sexual act itself. When the lights are on, I can distinguish between you and me. And here, when the lights are off, and I'm not using my eyes, I'm using my senses, I feel this like something's changed. We're not two separate people anymore. We've welded into one. There is no self-consciousness because of my fat and it's gone. All it is a sensory feeling of closeness. The clothes, again, they're not in the picture because that would get in the way of our sense of unity. The lead up to the experience, which is supposed to be sexual and sensual and gentle and connecting, that's also that we are having the exact spiritual experience replicated in our physicality, where there is nothing but closeness and needs met, and a sense of whatever boundaries I had towards closeness and trust now have completely disappeared. Okay, sorry, I didn't want to talk too long, but like you got to conjure up this physical act. It's not spiritual by removing the physicality. It's becomes spiritual because we understand that the spiritual goal here is unity.
Okay, very nice. Thank you. Okay, so next question is, okay, next question is, what the, basically a few French words there. That's the next question. That was a reaction after this friend of mine, I don't know if she's on the call, whatever, either way, watched this series, and she is followed that up by another text, which was, is this realistic? Is this you guys? Is this normal Judaism? Is this what God wanted? Like there were like a lot of follow-ups to that question. So take it where you shall.
I mean, I hope I've answered that. I know it's funny because, like I didn't watch the whole thing, but I watched the bits that were pertinent, and I got a sense of what was going on in the story. And somebody said, oh, like we need to defend ourselves, and I thought to myself, I feel like I have to defend myself, because of this series, like I would feel if I watched a story of a woman from an Indian tribe, or from a family in I don't know, in Burma, Myanmar. It had nothing to do with my experience. Yes, it's Judaism, as the overall, but this is a woman telling her story. Is she telling an accurate story? I don't know. Is it a sad story? It's a terribly sad story. And were there bits of the Jewish community that I really recognized? Lots of it. But I recognized nice bits. I recognized, some nice, some not nice. I recognized the Jewish sense of community. I recognized the Jewish sense of family values. I recognized, not in my own experience, but I guess in some people's experience, like the pressure of too much family closeness. I recognize a little bit of the food. I recognize the emphasis on family holidays, Jewish holidays. But in terms of the intimacy, here's a woman who's experiencing, like a terrible, terrible situation whereby she's not able to access any sexual pleasure because her anxiety is up in the air, and that's affecting her sexually. That's her story. That to me had nothing to do with the Jewish experience. This is her story. Was her husband guided? well enough? No. Like I think the biggest complaint for me is why she was having the sex therapy sessions, which I thought was very nice that they that they recognized that she needed help over there. But A, that should have happened before she got married, and B, in a situation where a husband's wife is suffering severe anxiety, yes, she has to get her own therapy, but he needs to know what to do. The sad thing is, like, the only time he ever has an opportunity in this series, to get any advice how to deal with a woman is when he gets set up with a prostitute. I mean, that was way off. The experience for a Jewish husband and wife should be different to anybody else who are experiencing all sorts of sexual experiences. It's not in the amount of pleasure that they're experiencing, it's in the context. Meaning the most rapid difference, the most obvious difference in the sexual experience is not in the power of sex. Like, we all have the same bodies, it works the same for everybody. It's in the fact that it is taking place very, very carefully within a marriage and within a closed door. Again, the fact that they even opened the door to the bedroom scene, like, no one's opened a Jewish bedroom scene on TV before. Like, that was weird, and it was like a bad example, I have to say. It's the context of marriage over here is supposed to create a sense of, this person's completely committed to me. Like, we have a whole bunch of time to be able, our whole lives, to be able to get this right. And what you have over here is a couple who are misguided, who are really struggling with something very physiological that's clearly psychological. But I'm not. Is there any surprise that she's experiencing anxiety? No, of course not. So did I look at that and see me? No. And I think if you are close enough to any person who's involved in halachic lifestyle, I'll be very surprised if anybody says, oh yeah, I saw me in that. I just saw a sad story that looks like it's representing Judaism that is completely miles off any of the guidelines of Jewish law that are there to really help the couple feel pleasure and closeness. It was just, to me, it was a sad story. I actually felt really bad for the husband as well. He's so clueless and desperate. I felt it was like it was a human tragedy. It was not a Jewish representation. And it's all gone quiet. Hello, Zehava. Oh, I think she's gone. Okay, hold on. I'm going to look back at that question that came up in the chat. Give me 1 second. Oh, no, it's gone. It's not on the chat. Yeah. Say that again. It sounded like you were in a fishbowl. Oh, yes.
Hear me?
I don't know. Talk and I'll tell you if I can hear you.
Can you hear me, Ilana?
It's a bad connection, but I might be able to make out what you're saying.
I'm talking.
Okay, go for it. Do you want to type?
Okay. Do you hear me? I'm so sorry. I don't know what's going on.
Do you want to type something so I can see it on the screen? Because I can't hear the I can't hear the word.
Me?
Kind of.
Can
You typing? 0 to 60. Okay. What does that mean? I'm assuming that means the couple got no experience before, and now they have, and now they have, and now they've thrown into it. Okay. Yeah. So okay. So first of all, there are many different practices in terms of a young couple. You have couples who will spend the first, sort of few days after they get married, before they throw themselves straight into, sort of sexual intercourse, they will really spend time just becoming comfortable and enjoying and, kissing and hugging and doing all that kind of stuff. And there are some couples, who go straight there. And like I remember learning in psychology that there was this experiment that they did with cognitive development, where they put a baby who was a certain amount of months old, at the edge of a staircase, and every day the baby would climb one step, and then the baby would climb a second step, and the baby would climb a third step, until eventually, after like a week or two, the baby was able to climb all the steps. And then they took another baby and they allowed a bit more time to pass. I think it was probably 1 or 2 months more, right? And then they put this baby at the bottom of the staircase, and this baby was able to go right to the top. So you have to understand what you mean by 0 to 60. We start exploring sex in 2020 very, very early. As our kids have got a horrible amount of exposure to sexual stuff and to porn and everything else. There's a lot of teenage exploration that happens, and when you start exploring sexuality as soon as you feel any form of drive or hormones, or there's pleasure, then you can't go 0 to 60. Really, you shouldn't be going 0 to 60, because your body's very, very young for this, right? And I think nowadays kids are experiencing sexual I don't know, I guess adventure or experimentation often even way before they have any form of drives. It's just something that happens sort of socially, and it's very hard to control that, right? You have to understand, when a couple hasn't really engaged in any sort of sexual outlet because of Jewish law, until they get married, and by the time they're married, they are in their early 20s. We don't really need that much time. Like the body is ready for it, the relationship is ready for it. There is nothing unnatural about going sort of very quickly into sexual expression. But in fact, the hardest thing for engaged couples that I deal with, is the fact that like they're feeling very safe in their relationship, they're feeling extremely attracted to each other, and Jewish law says, you can't even do 0 till the chuppah, right? Like, there is nothing until the 0 to 60 at that point. Doesn't feel like, wow, that was overwhelming, it was too much. It feels like, finally, we are so ready for this. For a couple to have gotten to know each other well enough that they've committed to marriage, and to have spent a whole engagement like trying to hold back from each other, and to have been physically mature enough and old enough that they're of marital age, there's the only unnatural thing actually for the couple is that engagement period when they can't engage physically, according to Jewish law, right? It has to be post chuppah. So 0 to 60, it's like, it's a relief. It's not for a couple to be able to physically express what they're feeling, emotionally and sexually, like that's a very natural next step. So again, some couples nevertheless, want to, sort of get involved in understanding and enjoying every stage of affection before they get all the way to intimacy, and that's totally their prerogative. And couples will sometimes discuss this ahead of time, or they'll sometimes, feel it out as they go. Whatever works for a couple is fine. A couple does not have to be, sort of sexually active before they're ready to. But if you think about it, by the time you're in your 20s and you've committed to marriage and you've had a whole engagement, you're pretty ready. Like I don't think it's anywhere near as unnatural as I guess it sounds. I think on the contrary, the unnatural part is the holding back until the marriage. I think that's what many couples will testify to.
Okay. Thank you. The next question, I think you kind of went into it, but at least the first part. The next question was, is the sexual relationship meant to be pleasurable? Why are there so many rules? And how does the mikvah play into this?
Yeah, okay. The rules are very important. The rules are there for the pleasure. The rules are guidelines, and again, most of the rules can be ignored if the couple knows that they have a better way of accessing pleasure. They are there to help the couple, access pleasure, the closeness, the focus, on the whole thing is about pleasure. And I guess it's a little bit, I wouldn't say sexist, but it's a little bit uneven over here. The obligation really is, and if you look at the psychology of people, it works very, very beautifully. The male focus is entirely the responsibility for his wife's pleasure, and the woman's focus is also the responsibility for her own pleasure. And again, you have to look at what human tendency is. I don't like to talk about men and women because I know we're all a bit of a combination of both, but let's just bear with me for a second, with the understanding that we all have both. Yeah. But what the Jewish law is trying to do is it's trying to take the often present mistake that the male may make, which is to make this about his own experience. There is something in sexual dominance and in testosterone that could easily allow the man to make the mistake of using this experience for his own satisfaction, for his own sense of, I don't know, bravado or whatever it is. And Torah is saying, you're going to make a mistake over here if you see this as what you can get from the experience. Torah teaches us something very, very powerful about men and women. Our nature and our growth are not always 100% in line. If the nature of the man is to be, about him and his dominance and his, his control, whatever that is, Torah is teaching, you don't know this unless I teach this to you, but you will have a deeper sense of satisfaction if you use your sense of, territory actually to in a response of responsibility. Meaning, don't take care of yourself, take care of others. It will give you a deeper sense of satisfaction. And therefore, the Torah is guiding the man to put his own desires, which can be very overwhelming and very powerful. Of course, they can sexually, second to his wife's. If you can come out of this experience knowing that you've taken responsibility for your wife's pleasure, that's going to give you a deeper sense of pleasure. And the message to the woman is, you're always focused on everybody else. That is the nature of a nurturing sort of disposition. But over here, the way that you're going to achieve closeness is by taking down whatever resistance you have. If vulnerability sounds like a scary word, this is a place of vulnerability. Your job over here is to allow yourself to be taken care of by this man. It's going to bring closeness to you. It's going to bring respect to the relationship. It's going to make you feel what you're supposed to feel as a woman. So when a man goes into a sexual mindset with like, what can I get from this, and a woman goes into the sexual mindset with like, what can I give, that's very natural. But the deeper level of pleasure is when the man changes this question of what can I get from this to, what can I give to this? And when a woman changes her mindset from what can I give to this to how can I be given to in this? And again, if you look at history, if you look at the nature of sex through history, you'll see time and time again all patterns of sexual mistakes and sexual abuse, which has been prevalent throughout history, like enormously, is when the male mindset is what can I take, whether that lends itself in rape or all the other things that we see as sort of sexual mistakes throughout history. And when the woman's mindset is, when she's forgotten herself in this experience and she's just sort of available to take care of the needs of, that doesn't create closeness. That's very natural. It's a very natural outgrowth of the typical male throughout the ages and the typical female throughout the ages. But Torah is saying, I have to totally re-educate you man, shift from self to other. Woman, shift from other to not selfishness, but being given to, allowing this man who's trying to look after you to succeed by being open to what he has to look after you. And because that shift is an unnatural shift, it will bring deeper pleasure. A woman who is receiving pleasure in the bedroom will bring her deeper pleasure, and a man who's looking after his wife, that will bring him deeper pleasure. But that needs to be a guided experience, because again, as you see throughout history, there's been a tendency for women to forget themselves and for men to forget anybody else when it comes to sort of like sort of sexual interaction. So the Torah is saying, no, this is a very, very, very sacred place, and in this sacred place, we're going to bring out a much deeper, less natural, less intuitive approach to this relationship, but you're going to feel a much deeper level of pleasure where the man is the giver and the woman is the receiver, and that needs a certain amount of guidance. It's not there for restriction, it's there to make sure that we are making that shift from what could be our natures and into a deeper level of pleasure. Very magical transition for a man to go from self-centered to completely other-oriented, and very, very powerful transition for a woman to go from taking care of others as a defense mechanism to her own pleasure, to being, open and no longer putting up the barriers, to what can be given to her. It's a very big transition, and that needs to be done, within the context of commitment. Man isn't giving unless he's committed, and a woman doesn't really feel safe to be vulnerable unless she's committed. So that's really the shift that's happening over there. Mikveh, I don't want to go into all the rules of mikveh, of course not. This isn't the time for this. But just in the vein of how we're talking about this over here, there's something very helpful in the transition, of that woman who's spending her whole time worrying about everybody else. There's something very powerful about her being able to go into a mikveh where, literally, like the Torah says right now, I have to hang out in a bath. It is a very, very important a physical space for her to achieve something where she's turned off from all responsibility to everybody else, and she can actually, the Torah obligation is like sit in the bath and chill, make sure you're clean and all of that, but there is an unwinding there. She is shifting from her running and going and committee meetings and kids and other. It's a bit of me time, and that me time is an extremely helpful transition into in my bedroom. This isn't about me checking off another obligation to somebody. This is actually about me being safe and open and receptive of the love and care that I'm going to receive. Mikveh, again, without going into all the laws and the reasons for it in terms of the Jewish law, I don't know the technical side of it. In terms of an emotional mindset switch, it's getting the woman out of her other mindset, like just taking care of others all day long, and allowing her to just come back into a sense of like, okay, this is my evening, this is connection, this is closeness, this is being looked after. It's a fantastic place to switch into Jewish marriage mindset. Yes, somebody wanted to speak their question, which means Zehava needs to unmute them.
Hi, Ilana, how are you?
Hello, who's that?
Jessica Simpson.
Hi,
Jessica. Simpson. I'm Cohen.
Oh, hello.
How are you?
Good, lovely. What's your question?
Oh
my gosh, Jessica! Wow, that's crazy.
Jessica. For everyone else, I guess. Ilana and Jamie were very instrumental when I was engaged and getting married at Aish in London, and super friendly. I wanted to ask a question.
Yeah, go away. This is women's only. My husband's just walked into the room. He got excited to hear Jessica. He hasn't been here now.
Sorry.
It's so funny.
I had a question, and actually more than I listened to you, I realized that the series actually did really frustrate me, because one of the things that it did was it showed me just how receptive she was to just leaving everything behind and moving into the non-religious world. and then they had to have her pick up someone in a club. And it really bothered me, because I don't feel like that's how it is in real life. She was just so ready to, she was able to get on a plane and just talk to men and be in the company of men on their own, and just leave everything so easily. You know, having been into that life, you know.
Yeah, I know. I'll tell you the one thing that I don't know if anybody else thought this, but to me this was actually very comforting, even though it was so upsetting in this particular series. But I took something from here, and that I hope gives us all a lot of strength and courage, you know. And that is, again, I have no idea this woman, the woman behind the character and her real story. And I have, number one. Number two, we have no idea how much of her story was Hollywooded, you know, to make a great Netflix series. Okay, like, so there are so many pieces missing from the reality to the, you know, to what was produced. But if there is any accuracy in the story, you know, whereas, yes, it was I'm talking about 0 to 60. I mean, just going from this sheltered life to being so comfortable in this, in a very, by the way, a very non-realistic portrayal of what it's like to have to, you know, make your way into a brand new society where you're suddenly accepted and everything's wonderful and you have a whole bunch of friends. Like, it's not that easy in real life, even if you are transitioning from one society to the other. But as I was watching it, I kept on thinking, like, it's absolutely amazing. She's got this, you know, mother who's been absent from her life this entire time, you know, who made her choices 20 years ago, 30 years ago, who's got nothing to do with her story, you know, and in the end, somehow she picks her mum's life, you know. And I thought to myself, you know what? It's really powerful. Sad in this particular instance, but it's really, like, it's almost, part of me was thinking maybe she didn't even stand a chance. Maybe the influence of the mother on a child is so enormous that at the end of the day, you know, like, somehow, without having anything to do with this mother of hers, her whole life, it's her mother's choices that are the greater influence on the rest of her life than anything else in her nurture, you know. And I actually took this to heart, you know, in a way that I flipped I trying to flip things from the negative to the positive, you know. But, like, look at that, look at the power of a mother. You know, without even being involved in her life, she ended up being such a massive stamp on her daughter's choices, even without even bringing her up, you know. So I don't know how sensationalized that switch was. Like, you know, like somebody said to me, like, I don't know, I wish it was that easy to just land in a foreign country, you know, and just make it socially. Like, you know, I have no idea, you know, whether that really depicts the person behind the character that they were trying to portray, and how much has been Hollywooded. You know, but yes, the sensationalizing of a world that actually is, you know, the irony over here is that she's in such a safe, beautiful world, very foreign to many of us, but certainly safe, and certainly quite nurturing. And she, you know, she ventures out on her own to something which is so precarious, you know. And in this movie, you know, that is highlighted as the place of joy. Like, I think what they need to do is they need to do another Netflix series about somebody who catapults themselves from, you know, from the other way around, from that life to, you know, back into their Jewish values. I think that would, you know, there needs to be sort of a counterbalance. But yeah, I appreciate your sentiment entirely, and please let me know how I can be in touch with you. It's so nice to hear from you after all these years. Send me a message.
Okay. Didn't know you knew each other before, but that's so nice.
Crazy.
And I feel so bad because there's so many other people, 2 other people who texted me that said, oh, I'm so excited to see Ilana, and then they can't get on, and people got kicked off now because my computer, I don't know what happened. I'm so sorry. Anyway, the next question, is shaving the head just for the Hasidic? Is hair shaved or cut for Orthodox? I heard that the woman is only I heard that the I heard that the woman is only to be attractive to the husband. So why would the head be shaved? Women look beautiful in sheitel, so are therefore very attractive.
Yeah. Yeah. Shaving heads is not representative of Jewish women. Zehava, I don't know how long your hair is. I know mine much longer than the wig that I wear. It's a very particular custom within Hasidic circles, and its base, it seems, on something quite technical with regards to the mikveh, making sure that there's no knots in the hair. And from what I understand, more and more Hasidic women are not opting for shaving their hair, and that's become more and more acceptable in Hasidic circles. But yes, you're right in the sentiment behind your question, which is that if we are keeping our hair in private, we're keeping it for our marriages. I once had a young Hasidic friend, and I asked her this question. I'm like, I really don't get why you shave your hair. Your hair's supposed to be to make, for your marriage. And she answered in like I guess I could relate to her answer. She sort of said like, my hair is meant to be for my marriage. For you, that's that's looking pretty because that's your world. For me, that's using it to enhance our practices. That's my world. I'm like, okay, I can respect that. But no, it's certainly not found. I've never seen it found in any place other than, again, certain Hasidic sects, and not all of them. And again, not necessarily imposed on every girl. And I would venture to say, if that's how you grew up and that's your normal, then that's your normal. And I don't think the girls walk around with their heads shaved. I think they will always wear something on top of their shaved heads, so they're not walking around sort of bald, at home. But again, the problem over here with Unorthodox is because it was the first time that we had such a I guess intimate view into the home and bedroom and everything else of a Jewish family, to the public, that this has become the Jewish experience. It's definitely not. First of all, not only is it not always accurate, but even what it is portraying is the Satmar experience, which, and I'm sure there's many Hasidim watching it and thinking like, I'm from a different Hasidus, we don't do that either, it's one tiny little aspect of one, his Judaism, and then his Hasidism, and then within that his Satmar, right? So that can't be representative of the whole picture, and it's not. So I don't even need to talk about it because I'm not Hasidic, so I don't really get the whole hair shaving thing, but I respect that people do, their own customs. And if it works for them, it works for them. But certainly if you're wondering whether this is like general, Jewish orthodoxy, nope. She says, with her hair under her wig, but yeah.
Okay. Anyone who's on have any other questions? Because the other questions that we got here really mostly were covered. Ilana covered most of the questions.
Okay, good.
A lot of them were similar questions. I think just a lot of people who watched this series thought they're getting an eye into like the Orthodox world, and that freaked them out. And they're like, they're just kind of curious, I would say, what's real, what's not real, what's mainstream Orthodox. I got a few questions. So are you modern Orthodox? Are you conservative? No, this is normal, whatever normal means, whatever, I don't know if you call me normal, but whatever mainstream Orthodox, or I don't like those labels anyways, but mainstream Judaism, that's not what's depicted in this movie.
So one second, let's just talk about this very briefly historically, just to clarify things very, very, very briefly, because it's not, it's a different part of the conversation. But I guess just to understand what Hasidus really is, where it all came from. When you speak about orthodoxy over the years, many like the Jewish world was what we would now call mainstream Orthodox, right? Meaning you looked in the Torah and it told you what to do, and that's what you did. And of course, there were certain differences based on what parts of the world you were on. So you've got your very classic division of Sephardi Ashkenazi, which is another way of saying sort of, Europe and Asia, or however the differences were, that where we all kept the same laws, but there were slight nuances in terms of language of the prayers, and certain customs were different. But we were all what we would, I guess, nowadays call mainstream Orthodox. And really the way that we engaged in our orthodoxy was that there was a lot of Torah learning, And through the intellectual understanding of what the Torah, is prescribing and describing and requiring from people, so the Jewish home was built. There came a time where there was so much persecution in Europe specifically, that men did not, and women as well, even if they had the tools, that there was no opportunity for people to become learned. So the Judaism in their homes, which was really predicated on an understanding of Torah, like an intellectual understanding, was completely compromised. And because people weren't able to, learn it and then apply it, it was affecting their application. And this was really during dark times in Europe. So there was a movement that began recognizing the fact that you're not going to have, each household should have, the head of the house should be like the rabbi, as it were, right? They should be learned, they should be able to, really be a pillar of intellectual understanding of Torah into their home. It became very clear that that was no longer possible. And there was a fear that if you take away the intellectual relationship with understanding Torah from the home, you're going to end up with a very watered down version of Judaism in the home. So in response to that, there was a movement that was set up whereby even if you yourself as a Jewish man were not able to become learned, you are now sort of completely attached to the Rebbe, to the man in your community who would be your source of Torah knowledge on your behalf. And if you couldn't engage intellectually through understanding Torah, what you would do is you would engage through joy, through dance, through prayer, through, even if you weren't able to become a learned person, you could engage in your relationship with God, in a simpleton's manner, if you like. Okay, I'm sure. I hope any chassid listening to me would feel that is like a sort of a very nutshell understanding of how this concept of each household had learned roots in them, had when there wasn't the ability to have roots based in intellectual relationship with Torah, now they were able to have a connection based in, at least being part of something. And as a result of that, the Hasidus model is very, very Rebbe centric, because if you didn't know, you went to your rabbi. And now we did this nowadays, by the way, because we're also a bit ignorant. If we don't know an answer, we'll call our rabbi. But in the old days, people were learned; they knew the answers themselves. So there was this focus on Rebbe centric, right? There was one man in the town who was really learned, and he was the central connection to the actual intellectual understanding, and the practices. Again, were based, a lot on rituals and on joy and on prayer and on all the things that even if you couldn't deepen your learning because you couldn't put the years into the books, you could have a connection. And really, I guess that's the beginning of how Hasidus began. And you'll notice that if you go into a Hasidic house, there is an enormous emphasis on the significance of ritual and custom and the way we do things and the way we dress, because people, again, they weren't connected through their understanding; they were connected through their actions. So you're talking about like a small, like quite a large, but relative to the whole Jewish world, a response to a losing of Jewish connection that was replaced with, and again, during difficult times, with lots of joy and dance and sort of simpleton's connection to Judaism, if you like. And that's where Hasidus really began, and took off, and then got destroyed over the war, and then it got rebuilt. So when we talk about all these different types of Judaism, we're all connected to Torah. The question, that's a source. There's a God who wrote the Torah. Like if you're in, you're in, right? Whether you keep things is a completely different question, but like that's what it means to be connected Jewishly. Like there's God communicates to the people, and then there's all these different ways of affiliating to this message from God. I mean, that's what the Torah is. It's just God's, expression of how to have meaning and how to have morality to humanity, right? That's what this whole story is all about. So if you look at history, you'll see different times in history creates a different provides a need that creates a different reaction depending on what the community needs, and that's what creates all the different sort of sects, whether it's physically, geographically, whether it's because of a particular time issue or a communal issue that happens, societal issue. That's where all the differences come about. But at the core, everybody wants, meaning and morality, and that's what the Torah is there to give everybody. And whatever piece you have of it, that's going to be your instructions for wisdom and for living. So we have a lot more. We all have a lot more in common than we have apart. We've just gone in different directions as sort of history and presented different opportunities. So yes, so you're having a tiny little window into a slightly Hollywooded, romanticized, and inaccurate, portrayal of Satmar within Hasidism, within Judaism. So no, is that representative? Hard to say that it is.
It's not even representative of the Satmar community because
it was misrepresented.
So much beautiful customs that they have, and even if I don't even understand it. To me, it's extreme. To me, it's intense, but it's still beautiful, and they're happy and well-adjusted and good people, and there's a tremendous amount of like chesed and just amazing things that they do, and it's just,
right. Well, I think you see a little bit of that in the movie. You see a lot of family support, and you see a lot of goodwill. You do a little bit. They allow that, but certainly what you're seeing is one very pained woman's very, very human story. Like it's to call that a representation of the community is like, woo, the focus is on her human frailty and her personal story, which is not at all a reflection of her community. It's just a reflection of, again, her and her own mother's story and her own physical, experience. Like this is not the story of the Jews, and this is not the story of the Hasidic Jews. This is not even the story of the Satmar Jews. It's one very pained lady's, Hollywooded story. And I think we have to really bear that in mind when we watch the story. Like I said, I didn't understand why I needed to defend this. This has nothing to do with Judaism. This is just somebody's story, But I guess because it was the first time the door was opened in, especially on so much of the private areas of Judaism, and the door was opened so badly. Again, the problem with Judaism is that, like, one of the things that makes a Jewish bedroom is the fact that the door's closed. Like one of the outstanding features of Jewish intimacy is the privacy. I mean, you would be horrified, if you saw your rabbi and rebbetzin like making out like on a park bench, like even if they were doing it really nicely and Jewishly, and he was looking after, like, it'd be like, wait, hold on a second, your instinct would know that there's something wrong with that, because the main feature that adds so much safety to Jewish intimacy is the privacy, involved in it. In fact, quite honestly, like the fact that we're all having conversations at Unorthodox is to some degree a compromise on the fact that this conversation has always usually been private, but because it's been so publicized, there needs to be a response to it because so many questions have been asked. Even that is a compromise. Like, how often do you talk about Jewish sex on a Zoom conference? Like this is a new and necessary response, again, because you got to respond to such a thing. But because you never see it at work, it's always in a closed room. That is part of the beauty and the safety and the connection and the unity of it all. Even if they had got it right, the very opening of the door on it, was misguided. But once they open the door and it's the wrong picture that you're seeing, and that's what people see, and there's no counter picture, because no genuine or authentic Jewish couple are going to want to open their door, because again, that's the whole point. Like, it's the screen that takes away from the Jewishness of an intimate experience. It's the whole public notion of it. So you've got no other visual to compare it to. So how unfortunate that the first Jewish bedroom visual, has been just such a major conflict to the reality of the Jewish intimate life. How unfortunate. Anyway, I hope I've shared, without making anybody uncomfortable or being too overt. I hope I've shared a little bit of the character, the nature, the spirit of what it means for a Jewish couple to be together in peace and harmony, and as I always say, irrespective of your Jewish affiliations, if there's any wisdom in any of what you heard tonight that you feel would enhance your Jewish life, that's your Jewish right. You know, so take home anything that will bring you closer to harmony, to peace, to love, to togetherness. Any little insight that you think will up your Jewish experience, you know, is yours to take home with pride.
Thank you very, very much, Ilana. I think you gave us a very good, healthy perspective on the series and on insight into a healthy, normal Jewish marriage and what it's intended to be. Anyone, any last questions? You can raise your hand. I'll see if I have any. Most people are not.
Pleasure.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks for the lovely message. All right. And again, if you want any of those like short marriage videos, try Ilana and Jamie on Instagram. You'll see some really like helpful tips for relationship building.
Okay. Thank you, Ilana.
Pleasure. Be well.